Hello, and welcome to Xavier University. I'm Rachel Crastel. Today, we are honored to speak with Dr. Gavi Begtrup, who is a candidate for mayor of the city of Cincinnati. This interview is sponsored by Take It On, Xavier's nonpartisan initiative to encourage better dialogue and robust, peaceful engagement in politics. With me today is Christo Fassi, Take It On's student intern. So welcome, Dr. Begtrup, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Fassi for the first question.
Once again, Dr. Begtrup, thank you very much for being with us. Our first question is, why should college students care about the mayoral election?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for that. The reality is we spend so much time thinking about national politics. It's what makes the news. It's what's on the 24-hour cycle, and even state politics. But the reality is the things that affect your life the most are those happening closest to you. And I know it's mundane things sometimes like roads and all that. But that matters, right? The things that change the future outcome of the city really are determined in City Hall. And so I encourage everybody at every age to take a real look at city politics and city government and administration because it does really make a difference. It makes a difference to the fabric of our neighborhoods. It makes a difference to how interconnected our neighborhoods are. So Xavier students are right on it's actually really interesting for Xavier students, right? Because Xavier is right there at the border of Cincinnati in this enclave called Norwood, right? And you can see sometimes, even just in the roads, the difference between one side of the street and the other side of the street. It's a pretty clear demarcation of what the city can do. But also, it's about things like public transportation. If we want a truly vibrant, livable city, we need a government both in the city and in the county that are working together to make sure we have complete streets, to make sure it's easy to get around. You're a student at Xavier, maybe you have a car, maybe you don't have a car. Wouldn't it be great if you could get downtown? And oh, by the way, you like going to OTR? Well, a lot of that, the redevelopment of OTR was driven by government partnerships. So the fabric of the whole city is really most closely determined by the city government and its partners throughout, the nonprofit, philanthropic, and business world.
So why is it then that Xavier students should support your candidacy for mayor?
Well, I'm probably the closest in age to them, so that's got to count for something. Look, kids, I'm cool and hip and young. Apparently, I have a TikTok, though I haven't seen it. No, but the reality is, my campaign for mayor is all about changing the way our city works so that it's more focused on how we invest in people and less focused on trying to make the wealthy wealthier. If you do pay attention to the city, what you'll find is that a lot of attention has been paid to development deals that often are done by out of town groups that leave our neighborhoods actually worse off in a way, right? We divest from certain neighborhoods, we pour money into other neighborhoods. And unfortunately, what we found in the last few years is that a lot of those dealings were corrupt. We've had now a third of city council indicted and removed. And the worst part about that is that they weren't even working together. They were all independently out there soliciting bribes. And made us lose trust in our entire government. And you hear that when I've knocked on thousands of doors and talked to Cincinnatians all across the city. And the number one thing I hear is that A, City Hall is corrupt, and B, they don't get anything done. So I'll give you a quick example. I've been very involved in our community. I'm a small business owner. My last was actually across the street from Xavier at the Hamilton County Business Center. I also have a lot of experience in policy, which is why you'll hear me talk about a lot of policy ideas. I was a policy advisor for Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Probably most Xavier students weren't paying attention to politics when I was in Congress, but I spent 3 years working for a member of Congress who subsequently became pretty famous. But the big thing is we got a lot of things done. We passed billion-dollar budgets. We worked with stakeholders to pass bipartisan legislation. But let me talk about what I've done just down the street from Xavier. I was the board chair of a public magnet school called the Donald and Marion Spencer. If you know your Cincinnati history, you know that those are two great civil rights icons. And we built this school. I built it from the very beginning, from 0 to 350 kids. And the amazing thing about this school is that it served gifted kids from all over the city. Gifted education has a long history of being white and affluent. And what we did was we created a school that brought in kids from all over the city, 25 different neighborhoods last I checked. And it looks like the city. It's a majority minority school. It's a 40% free and reduced lunch school. And 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 I'm really proud of that. But here's the thing. When the school opened, it didn't have a single crosswalk. You've got some really nice crosswalks around Xavier, right? You can get across the street. You can go down to Listerman's and grab a root beer. Um, and but this school had 7-year-olds crossing the street, didn't have a crosswalk, and I lobbied City Hall. I got the community council to reach out, the neighborhood community council in Walnut Hills, and we didn't get a crosswalk. It took 2 years to get a single response, and that was a form letter that says crosswalks are expensive and it's not in the budget. Then in 2019, 8 Cincinnati public school kids got hit by cars walking to school. And then within weeks, without any communication from the city, we had a crosswalk. And we deserve a city hall that doesn't wait until kids get killed to do the right thing. So I'm running because I have the deepest policy experience, having written, and passed legislation in Congress, which is no easy feat. I have deep executive leadership experience, having built organizations, and I believe that Cincinnati can be better if we work together, collaborate, and invest in neighborhoods and families. And I think that puts me starkly opposed to the career politicians I'm running against.
Thank you, Dr. Begtrup. Now, if you're elected as mayor, what will be different about the city of Cincinnati by the time our first-year students are seniors?
Well, that's a great question. Well, when I'm elected mayor, the first thing we're going to get to work on is we've been handed this tremendous opportunity to rethink Cincinnati. There's $291 million coming from the government, coming from Biden's stimulus, and there's a few different things we can do that. First of all, we have to plug the holes in our budget, which were an outcome of COVID, and we need to start rebuilding our city and rebuilding our small businesses. But we can build back, as the president would say, build back better. We can change the future of Cincinnati to be much more equitable than the current Cincinnati that your freshmen are in, right? So one of those examples is small businesses were hammered. I know I ran a small business that got hammered during the pandemic. But Black-owned small businesses in this city were hit twice as hard, and they actually were twice as likely to shutter during the pandemic. And it's because they don't have the same access to institutional capital, to loans and things like that. And that's a systemic problem. So one of the things we're going to do with the stimulus is actually take money and put it into a minority friends and family seed fund. Meaning we're going to take money from the stimulus, we're going to use that to catalyze more funding from the investor community, and we're going to set that aside to help rebuild small businesses. That means that for those of you who are thinking about starting a business here in Cincinnati, we're going to make that easier. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to create a one-stop shop. As a small business owner, and whenever I talk to my colleagues who have started businesses, they'll tell you that working with City Hall is absolutely Byzantine. It is really, really hard. Everybody just tells you to go talk to someone else. We're going to create a one-stop shop for the purpose of making it easy to build businesses here in Cincinnati. All right, so that's one thing, business. Let's talk about transportation. We're going to have a lot of transportation funding coming to Cincinnati. There's some money that we can spend out of the stimulus, but my expectation is that we will have a multi-trillion-dollar stimulus bill coming from Congress in the next year. So we need to be thinking about what that can mean for Cincinnati. Sure, we can just patch up the streets, or we can make sure that every street is a complete street. Make sure that we have a plan for transportation so that you can get within 15 minutes to everything you need, regardless of whether you have your own car, want a bike, want to walk, or want to take the bus. And that takes planning and thinking about the future well beyond just how we're going to spend the money today. I want to talk about one more thing, which is police reform. 20 years ago, we had a police shooting of an unarmed citizen here in Cincinnati that led to a civic unrest, that led to a tremendous demonstration, and eventually led to what's called the collaborative agreement, which was an agreement between the city, the police force, and the community to change how we do policing. It's a great thing that came out of it, but unfortunately, it's another example of City Hall not acting until there was a tragedy. But here's the thing. As soon as that court-ordered collaborative agreement expired, the city stopped working on it. And I think from one way of looking at it is that the current City Hall we have is completely reactive, right? They only do things when they're forced to do them. Another way is to be proactive. And if instead of looking at police reform as something we have to do when bad things happen, we could look at police reform as something that we have the ability to do and lead the country in to make Cincinnati the best place to live, regardless of your zip code, regardless of the color of your skin. That's the dream. So we're going to get back on the horse with a collaborative agreement, and we're going to bring money to it. One of the things it created was a citizen complaint authority, which has been badly underfunded and therefore has a long, long laundry list of backlog of cases. So we're going to fix that. We're also creating a $1 million grant that's for community initiated ideas for reimagining police. I want to put money back into the hands of the community to figure out how to do some of the great ideas they've been thinking of that will improve police community relations. So by the time they graduate, we'll live in a city that leads the country in police reform, a city that has taken action on affordable housing, that has not only funded the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but changed zoning and changed how we do tax abatements to make sure that every neighborhood is growing and thriving. And we'll be in a city that is leading the country in new company formation, particularly Black and brown owned companies. And that's going to be an exciting city to live in.
Well, I think you kind of answered my next question, which is what's going to make our graduates want to stay in Cincinnati. You know, they come here. We love having them here in Cincinnati, and how can we get them to stay in this great city?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'm not from Cincinnati. My parents were in the Army, and so you end up wherever they end up. So I was born outside Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I moved to Cincinnati a decade ago because my wife took a position at Children's Hospital. And that's a pretty common story, right? You have the people who grew up in Cincinnati, have been in Cincinnati for 4 generations, and then you have those of us who have come because of economic opportunities. But we stayed because it truly is a wonderful place to live. I've lived all over the country. And I will tell you, Cincinnati is a place where you can truly make a difference. And that's really special. If you want to talk to anyone in this city, no matter how high up they are in a Fortune 500 or in a nonprofit or whatever, you can get to them and they'll talk to you. And it's not because you don't have to be someone special. You don't have to be someone that's really important or connected. You can connect and do things. And the reason I would encourage everyone to stay in Cincinnati is that obviously I just said we're going to make Cincinnati a much more livable place. We're going to invest in all these things that make it a better place to live, a better place to grow your family, and all those sorts of things, which maybe is not on your mind yet, but I got 3 small kids, so like it's on my mind. But also we're going to make it a place where you have tremendous opportunity, not just jobs, but you can be part of the community. And as you grow older, you start realizing a paycheck's a paycheck, but making a difference in your community is what really, really makes it home.
You mentioned, Dr. Begtrup, that you previously worked for Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, and in an article in the Cincinnati Enquirer, it reported that you worked for her in 2011, the year of her attempted assassination. Now, you called this the biggest moment of your life, and given that gun violence has increased across the country, as well as in Cincinnati, what policies would you implement as mayor to curb some of that violence?
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is an issue that's extremely personal for me. I did work for Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords from 2009 until she retired in 2012, and I was working for her on January 8th, 2011, when a gunman shot her in the head and left her for dead, and killed 6 people, including my friend and coworker Gabe Zimmerman. 2 of my other coworkers were also shot and thankfully recovered. And a bunch of other people were also shot. And I always make this point that there are those of us who have been in a shooting. There are those of us who have loved ones and friends who have been in a shooting. But the reality is all of us are affected by gun violence. Even if you never personally met anyone who is in a shooting, which unfortunately is becoming more and more rare that you can say that. Um, every life that is cut short is a loss for our community. I can say that with Gabby for certain. I mean, Gabby had a bright political career. She was well respected on both sides of the aisle, which is a hard thing to accomplish these days. She was an absolute joy to work for because she was smart and funny and interesting, and she actually cared about her community. And she really worked hard on figuring out what position she was going to take and how they would affect not only her community in Southern Arizona, but the whole country. And that was wonderful. And that was taken away. That was taken away not only from us and the people of Southern Arizona, but from the whole country. We lost a leader in Congress. But what's amazing is Gabby, despite her disabilities, despite the fact that she had to relearn how to walk and how to talk and how to sing, and I saw her do it. I saw her fight through that. She then rededicated her life to service. And to me, that's just absolutely amazing. It's a big piece of why I'm running. On January 8th of this year, I was on a Zoom call with Gabby and now Senator Mark Kelly and a bunch of former alumni, my former coworkers. And to see her a decade later fighting the good fight every single day inspired me to go jump into this race that nobody expected I would get into, that I didn't expect I'd get into, but felt like there was a real need and a real calling. So, gun violence, unfortunately, we have not seen Congress take action. I've been speaking on this issue and fighting on this issue for a long time. There's so many things that are so straightforward that everybody agrees with. Universal background checks are something that 95+% of Americans agree with. It's just not controversial. But unfortunately, we have too many career politicians in the pockets of lobbyists, and they just won't do anything about it. We need Congress to stop sending their thoughts and prayers and instead send a bill to the president's desk. But more locally, what can we do? Well, the most important thing we could do, our hands are really tied a lot um, by 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 legislation at the state and federal level. We've seen the city try and do things on guns and hasn't been able to do very much directly. Here's the thing we really can do. We can invest in families and communities. We can invest starting from the very beginning. Right now, you heard it in my story earlier. City Hall does not work with the public schools. I asked the city manager about this last week. It's on video, it's recorded, it's public, and there's nobody at City Hall who's tasked with the relationship with schools, which means that it's at best an adversarial relationship when there's a relationship at all. As she said to me, "Well, our lawyers talk," which is not a good situation. So one of the things that I will do in my administration is have a liaison between the city and schools. Why do I talk about schools? Because schools are where we reach the vast majority of the next generation of Cincinnati. But it's more than schools. We need opportunities. Our rec centers used to be the centers of our community and gave people things to do. When people are invested in their community and when they have economic opportunity, there's less violence. Here's another thing though, mental health. Right now in this country, it is easier to get your hands on an assault rifle than it is to get an appointment with a psychiatrist. We can fix that. We can invest in community mental health the same we've invested in community health. Cincinnati has led the country in community health, in community owned clinics. And we need to lead on mental health as well. We need to make sure that everybody has access to mental health care. And I don't mean to conflate mental health with violence. The vast majority of people with mental health issues or challenges are not violent. But we do need to make sure that we take care of people. So there's a lot we can do by investing in people and investing in our community.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. I think mental health is something that we talk a lot about on campus as well.
Yeah,
Caring
it's a big
for.
issue in colleges.
Mhm. So we have just one last question that Mr. Foskey will ask.
So, what advice would you give to college students who are wanting to go into local politics?
Oh, that's really easy. Go to votegavi.com/intern. The reality is, if you want to know how politics works, go get involved. I would say that for anything. If you want to know how any industry works, go get involved. But in the next 4 weeks, you actually have a tremendous opportunity to do that. We are running the biggest grassroots campaign in this race. We're running the only clean campaign in this race. I'm the only candidate who has committed to not taking any money from developers or corporate PACs that have business in front of the city because we need to restore trust in City Hall. And we can only do that if we know that there are no ulterior motives from our elected officials. So what we're doing instead is we're relying on people. We're out there every day, knocking on doors, talking to people and spreading the word, and we need help. So if you want to understand how real politics works at the ground level, come join our campaign. Um, and from there, you'll get to see the great thing about working on a local race, especially you work on a presidential race, you're never going to meet the president, and you're going to be so many levels away from anyone who's met anyone who's ever done anything in politics, right? You come work on a mayor's race, you're not only going to see how it's really done, you're going to hear the decisions we make because it's a small organization. So again, votegavi.com/intern. I would love to have you.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Dr. Begtrup. This has really been a pleasure. It's great to hear about your policy experience, and thank you for your willingness to serve the public. It's really inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.